from Buffalo to Uvalde, to those in agony at the insanity they call America. It is heartrending and insane and infuriating that 19 school children, 2 days shy of summer vacation, along with their teachers, are slaughtered as they sat in a school in Texas. It is heartrending and insane and infuriating that this comes only 10 days after 10 black people out shopping for food on a Saturday afternoon in the only supermarket in the entire black section of Buffalo, New York, are murdered by a white supremacist. It seems as if the solutions are obvious, and on one level they should be. But the roots of this run deep, so deep questions must be asked at a time like this, and deep answers must be sought. There is a rot at the heart of this society that needs to be excavated and confronted in order to really solve this. Ask yourself, how are horrors like these connected to the history of this country, with its empowering of white people to use violence to seize land and to enforce barbaric slavery? Traditions that, until relatively recently, were celebrated in the mainstream culture. What is the connection between the violence ripping through the cities and small towns of America and the violence committed by America in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and dozens of other places? How is this madness connected to an economic system and a culture that fragments and isolates people from each other into billions of powerless individuals competing against everyone else in a heartless world of winners and losers, rather than a world we could have? A world of freely cooperating human beings, taking care of each other and of nature. What is the connection between this violence and the violence done every day to women in 10 million ways in this society? And to the move right now to strip women of control over their own reproduction by outlawing abortion? And how might it be connected to the splitting of America in two, right before our eyes, and the growing talk of civil war? There are answers, and there is possibility. The possibility of a different society, one that does not run on exploitation and oppression and the destructive conflicts between people. There is a strategy to make the revolution needed to get to that society, and to do it in these times of extreme danger, but also of the possibility for revolution. There is leadership for that struggle in Bob Avakian and the RevCom. That leader, Bob Avakian, speaking in a different context, said something 20 years ago that rings out with force and relevance today. Quote, "No more generations of our youth, here and all around the world, whose life is over, whose fate has been sealed, who have been condemned to an early death or a life of misery and brutality, whom this system has destined for oppression and oblivion even before they are born. I say no more of that." From the book Basics, from the talks and writings of Bob Avakian. Let's make good on that vow this generation. If you have had it with this madness and you want to find out more about the movement for an actual revolution, go to revcom.us. Be sure to watch the Revolution Nothing Less show on YouTube every Thursday.
Welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. This is episode number 103, May 26, 2022. My name is Andy Zee. I'm the host of the show, coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Today's show is going to focus on two political issues: the fight for abortion rights and the police murder of black and brown people. Two outrages that are concentrations of the intractable crimes of this capitalist imperialist system that we live under. The oppression of women, and the violent assertion of white supremacy by the state. We are not just going to speak today of the cost in lives and spirit of millions of women if the Supreme Court overturns the constitutional right to abortion sometime in the next 6 weeks, as a leaked draft of their decision stated they intend to do. We will not just speak of what it means for half of humanity to have their fundamental right to decide if and when they choose to have a child and their very humanity ripped away by the government. We are not going to today only discuss again why forced motherhood equals female enslavement, or why, if the right to abortion is outlawed, women will face a future where, should they become pregnant, their wombs will be a site of surveillance by the state and potentially a crime scene should they have a miscarriage or decide to try to have an abortion outside this fascist law, should it be hammered into law by the theocrats on the Supreme Court. Or where anyone who helps them, a doctor, a family, a cab driver, can be sued by a vigilante fascist. On today's show, we are not just going to speak of this cost to women's lives. We will focus on what can be done now to stop this and the need for everyone to pull out all the stops that stand in the way of throwing this into the fight and doing so with all we've got. Then, yesterday, Wednesday, May 25th, 2022, was the second anniversary of the wanton, brutal murder of George Floyd, a black man in Minneapolis, murdered by a white cop, Derek Chauvin. Tens of millions of people watched on video Chauvin's depraved, indifferent disregard for the humanity of George Floyd as he kneeled on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes until the life was suffocated from him. This concentrated the depravity of white supremacy woven into the very fabric of America from 1619 down to today. A white supremacy underscored in the blood of 11 people in the racist mass murder of black shoppers in Buffalo, New York last weekend. Here too, on today's RNL show, we are not just going to remember and recount the brutal history of white supremacy and this brutal murder of George Floyd, but speak to the beauty and the potential that was shown in the rising of tens of millions in the wake of George Floyd's murder. This was an uprising rich in inspiration and lesson, revealing the potential of an aroused people, especially the youth of all nationalities and backgrounds, who recognized and deeply felt the need to act in the interests of humanity more than just looking out for their own self-interest. This, the basis, the need, and the morality of fighting against these and all forms of injustice and oppression are a theme that ties together today's program. Today's show will step back to the righteous uprising of millions in response to the police murder of George Floyd. And we will draw out the truth of what that outpouring represented and the crucial lessons of that struggle for the future. This understanding has great bearing on fighting forward right now to beat back the attack on the right to abortion with all that means for women. Whether or not half of humanity have control over their own futures, their very lives is completely bound up with the struggle to emancipate all of humanity. And that is what we, the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show, are all about. This is a show about and for nothing less than working and organizing today with all we've got to overthrow the exploitive and oppressive capitalist imperialist system that we live under through an actual revolution. Last spring, the RevComs issued a declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution. This put forth that we are in a unique moment, a rare time in this most powerful country in the world, the U.S., when a real revolution could be possible. The understanding of why this is and how to go about preparing and organizing for it has been forged by the revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian. In a crucial work for this moment in history, titled Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating, Profound Crisis, Deepening Divisions, the Looming Possibility of Civil War and the Revolution that is Urgently Needed, a Necessary Foundation and a Basic Roadmap for this Revolution. In this work, Bob Avakian brings out that, quote, bringing into being a revolutionary people in the millions, with an organized force of thousands at the core, leading these millions, is the key objective and necessary focus of revolutionary work now. in preparing to go all out for revolution with a real chance to win as soon as the conditions for that have been brought into being. And that changing the thinking of masses of people is pivotal for doing this. BA shows how, quote, as the normal way society has been ruled as failing to hold things together, and society is increasingly being ripped apart. This can shake people's belief, quote, that the way things have always been is the only way things can be. And we can see this in the shock and the confrontation that millions of people had when they saw how the leaked Supreme Court draft opinion 3 weeks ago in vicious fascist language revealed their intent to take away the constitutional right to abortion. Bob Avakian writes how such situations, quote, can make people more open to questioning the way things have been and whether they have to stay that way. And that this is more likely to happen if the revolutionary forces are out among the people, shining a light on the deeper reality of what is happening and why, and bringing out that there is an alternative to living this way. It would be empty talk to speak of forging a revolutionary people without waging a very broad and determined struggle for women to not be enslaved as breeders of children. Women, men, and differently gendered people standing up together for this right can raise the kind of questioning and lifting of political sites that create the conditions for masses of people to be open to that whole other way we could be living. This is why the Rev comes, and we here on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show are sincere in doing all we can to build the broadest principled unity for the objective of developing a sustained, determined struggle over the next few weeks to stop the Supreme Court from overturning Roe versus Wade in the right to abortion. As I said in the introduction to today's show, we are at a crucial juncture in the struggle to stop the U.S. Supreme Court from overturning the right to abortion. Today was also a day of action called by Rise Up for Abortion Rights, and right now we're going to show you just a couple of social media posts of this struggle.
Of the courts and legislators! Women are not incubators! Women are not incubators!
I am here today to say not only do we need to fight to stop this, we can win this.
So, Rise Up for Abortion Rights youth walkout. Look at this. Took the whole Brooklyn Bridge.
My choice! My body, my choice! My body, my choice! My body, my choice! My body, my choice! Our body, my choice! Our body, my choice! Our body, shut it down! Fuck no!
Shut it down!
Shut it down! Hey, abortion rights have got to stay! Ho ho! Hey hey! Abortion rights have got to stay! Ho ho! Hey hey! Abortion rights have got to stay! Ho ho! Hey hey!
So that was some of the social media from this morning. The main content of our segment today on the struggle for the right to abortion and to stop the Supreme Court from overturning that right begins with a talk by my co-host Sunsara Taylor, who is an initiator along with others of Rise Up for Abortion Rights, that she gave at Revolution Books Online on May 18th, titled Overturn Roe, Hell No. And that's going to be followed by a discussion we had on the road forward in this battle over the next weeks.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Michelle, and I'm with the Revolution Club, and I'm also with Rise Up for Abortion Rights. And I want to welcome everybody to this program with Sunsara Taylor, speaking on Overturn Roe, Hell No. And Sunsara Taylor is a co-host of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show on YouTube. She is a co-initiator of Rise Up for Abortion Rights, and she's a follower of the revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Back in 1964, speaking on Sproul Plaza at the University of California, Berkeley, Mario Savio, a student leader in the free speech movement, made a statement that has rightly become remembered and often quoted since. He said,
"There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart, that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
So I ask you tonight, right now, as the U.S. Supreme Court is on track, the highest court in the land in the most powerful country in the world is on track to decimate women's fundamental right to abortion within a matter of weeks, to slam the half of humanity that has been born female violently backwards. Is this not such a time? If we let the U.S. Supreme Court go forward and overturn Roe v. Wade, over 20 states immediately ban or severely restrict abortion. And that's just the beginning. More extreme bans are being introduced and passed almost by the day. In Ohio, just a couple weeks ago, Republican Gene Schmidt introduced a near total abortion ban. When asked, what if a 13-year-old girl was raped and became pregnant as a result of the rape, would this child be forced to have her rapist's baby? Gene responded, quote, "It's a shame that it happens, but there's an opportunity for that young woman, no matter how young or old she is, to make a determination about what she's going to do to help that life be a productive human being." An opportunity? These people, these fascist, lunatic haters of women have their hands on the levers of the state. Is this not such a time that is so odious? A time that makes you sick at heart that you can't take part, that you can't even tacitly take part. In Louisiana, Republican Danny McCormick proposed a law that would give full constitutional rights to a fertilized egg at the moment of conception, full personhood, and would charge a woman who gets an abortion or anybody who assists her with homicide. Arrests, handcuffs, prison, and yes, the death penalty for women who decide they do not want to be pregnant for whatever reason, or maybe just women who have a miscarriage. Is this not such a time where you've got to put your body upon the gears, upon the levers, upon the wheels of the apparatus and prevent it from functioning at all? And let's be clear, banning abortion will affect all women and girls, not just those who are victims of rape or incest, not just those who develop life-threatening complications during their pregnancies. Forcing women to have children against their will forecloses their dreams. It shatters lives. It drives women and traps women in poverty and abuse. This affects poor, impoverished, Black and brown women especially hard, but it affects all women, even women who never become pregnant. It makes them unmistakably aware, and it tells all of society that they are viewed in the eyes of the state, in the eyes of a patriarchal male supremacist society, as nothing more than baby-making machines, that their lives and their humanity doesn't count. So I ask you again, is this not a time for everyone who cares about women and girls, and everyone who cares about justice, to rise up and to indicate to the people who run this society that unless this is stopped, this machine, their society, will be prevented from functioning at all?
So that was Sunsara Taylor from Revolution Books Online on May 18th. Overturn Roe, Hell No was the title of her talk. But Sunsara Taylor, you are here via Zoom on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show.
That's absolutely right. I'm so happy to be back with you on the show, Andy. It's really good to see you.
Okay, well, you where we cut the speech off, I know that was only about a third of the speech, but we cut it off where you said what we need is a society-wide, sustained, massive, unrelenting, unstoppable struggle from below and from all quarters of society, that it becomes clear to the fascists in the Supreme Court and everywhere else that if they try to go forward with taking away the right to abortion, their society, the whole machine, will be prevented from functioning at all. So I think it'd be important to break that down in terms of what do we mean by that? Well, how does that happen? What does it look like? And then we can get into why could it actually work?
Yeah, I think we need to envision literally millions and millions of people throughout society showing which side they're on, coming into the streets in massive struggle and protest and resistance, but also taking this struggle for women's right to abortion against what the Supreme Court is on track to do into their lives in many different ways. Where you can imagine essential workers, bus drivers and hospital workers and people who make society function. If they even stopped work for 19 minutes and 73 seconds for 1973, the year that Roe v. Wade was passed, that would have reverberations across society. If you had artists, beloved singers and actors using their time on the stage to wear green and call on people to stand up for abortion and go into the streets. If you had people displaying this green everywhere, wearing it every day, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions wearing the green, showing where they stand, flying it out their windows like green flags, or draping major structures or statues or landmarks with green, making a statement with it, you start to have all of society take a stand and show what side they're on. And that's a big vision. There's a lot of other things we can envision, but there's thousands of people who have taken up the call from Rise Up for Abortion Rights to demand that the Supreme Court be stopped from overturning Roe v. Wade. If those thousands, including the very inspiring and furious young people, young women especially, as well as others who've been in the streets, who've been walking out, not only continued to walk out, but increasingly went and marched to the theater districts and challenged the actors and the people in the arts, or came to hospitals at shift change and called on the healthcare workers, the nurses and the doctors and everybody else to stand up and join this struggle for abortion rights. If those who've been involved in this struggle, including the women from Latin America and those with ties to Latin America where the Green Wave came from, who played a disproportionate role in this struggle, were a part of struggling for other sections of society to join in this fight. And again, the campuses were not just places students are walking out of, as important as that is and as much as that needs to be upheld and continued. But there was massive teach-ins where thousands of students were learning the history, debating the history of this. This became the question that everybody is talking about and learning about and struggling over and taking a stand on. And with how sharply this is posed right now, with the danger that's posed, and everybody, it's going to affect millions. And the truth we're standing on, and the thousands who've already stepped forward very fiercely around this, there's ways to work towards realizing that in very short order.
Yeah, I think it's really important. It was making me think back to when I was in high school, and without going into the whole story, we had to walk out from school, and they tried to get us to come back, and we made all kinds of demands, some of which were just, stop telling us to get haircuts and this and that. But it was the 1960s. But I'm not glad you got over that. That was a correct cultural thing at the time. But I like your haircut, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, but no, it was actually a struggle over the Vietnam War and over the oppression of Black and Puerto Rican people in New York and racism generally. But one of the demands we had was for a whole day. Actually, we asked for a week, as I recall, but we got a day of teach-ins in the school, and we really got into stuff. And it was very sharply contested by other students, and there was faculty on one side and the other, and the school was really split. But it was like the best, some of the best days at school ever. And I think a lot of people, these youth who are out there now, some of them are getting told by their parents, okay, you made your day. We've heard this. You had your day of protest, but now it's time to go back to school and stuff. And I was saying to you earlier that I was thinking of the song "Times They Are Changing" from Bob Dylan. When he said, "Come, mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly changing. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand. And I think this is important, Stan. These young people can get out and struggle with other people in society about stop playing by the rules of this game and let's get out and change these rules right now and really fight for this right to abortion to be sustained. And if we really get into the kinds of things you were just speaking about, well, then that's going to create a different situation for the Supreme Court, for the people in Congress, for the politicians, for the whole society to actually take a look at just exactly what they're risking. Just exactly what they're risking by going ahead with this decision. So I think we should just get into this, one more round, and then we can move on to some other questions.
Green graduations are also important. Graduation is coming up, high schools, colleges, coloring this with green. What is this generation's future going to be? What is your stand? What are you about? And it shouldn't be about me, me, me. And the voices coming at the youth and coming at everybody in this society, that even those who say, yeah, abortion's important, but why do you have to risk your future? These are very destructive voices, and we need to defy that and say it's not about me, 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 me. It's about humanity, and it's about the future of all women and girls. And if everybody was to stand up who cares about this and put that ahead of themselves and act together, we could win a future that's better for everybody. It's so important that people defy that right now. So in every level, but the green graduations would really symbolize something. And people, once you get this, you can get creative. I was talking with young people last night who were brainstorming all kinds of wild ideas, daring ideas to go challenge sports figures in major arenas and different ways that we could really shake up society. People need to aim big and not back down on the right that's on our side, that we refuse to see women enslaved by forced motherhood. We refuse to accept this from the government, from the state coming down on people. And if we got that dynamic going, and we've seen this in history, and it's part of why I love that Mario Savio quote that was in that speech and we've been popularizing, is both the stand and the vision and the moral conviction that he puts forward, but it's also a lived experience. It's part of the history of the 60s. This is the kind of struggle that was waged that won the rights to abortion and many other rights that we take for granted today and are now under assault today. And when you get that kind of dynamic going from below, you start to compel politicians and other figures in power to realize they can't appease you anymore with posturing and putting forward legislation that everybody knows is going to fail and not protect abortion rights. They're not going to appease you anymore. They're going to have to come out and try to be in the streets and themselves. And if you get the right dynamic going, that can encourage even more people to come out. And you start to have a dynamic where those in power are compelled to respond to your demands, what you are doing. And people all over the world are watching and inspired by that. And the ruling institutions have to calculate and be worried about losing any shred of legitimacy if they don't make some concessions, if they don't yield to some of what you are insisting upon from below. That's the dynamic, that's the power that the people have when they rise up and they act on that, right on their side, and putting humanity first and putting women first and daring to struggle and really daring to fight to win this one.
Well, I think that's important, this question of losing legitimacy. That does, especially here for the Democrats, they depend on the fact that they represent the more oppressed sections of society. And if they're losing the allegiance of that section of society, that can change things. And in terms of these fascists on the Supreme Court, there too, there's a calculation too. If that court is completely delegitimized, that becomes a contradiction, a problem for the ruling class as a whole, even as there is that fascist element does want to actually rip up the rule of law. That's the content of the Alito draft decision, is that, essentially goes back to, the 18th century and could be justification for all kinds of really oppressive laws. And in fact, that's where this is heading if those people stay in power. But even there's a question of what we do can change things by actually undermining the acquiescence of society that they have. And maybe here we should talk a little bit about, just briefly, about what's been a very big line or program that's been put forward by many different forces that Roe versus Wade, that's going to go. We know that. So what we really have to do is prepare for elections, the midterm elections in 2020. 22 this year, but also for state legislatures. And we have to work over a period of time to take back what's the majority of people want, and then we have to go do that kind of hard work right now. It is a very big line. It's affecting people, and the young people are now who are taking to the streets. They're hearing that from experienced movement people saying, "Oh, don't do this. It's not going to work. Here's a practical approach to this." And as Bob Avakian has said in the past, the politics of the possible are the politics of monstrosity. But maybe you could speak a little bit to this line on elections. And then I want to move back to what you said before about having the interests of all humanity. What motivates you?
Well, first of all, this is something that Bob Avakian goes into very deeply. I cannot commend highly enough the piece that he recently did on the Supreme Court moving to take away the right to abortion and the need to take to the streets and refuse to let this go down. And he takes on dead ends, and this is one of them. And I'll just say briefly here and refer you to the article that the Democratic Party's track record on abortion has been to actually facilitate this fascist assault, to capitulate to it again and again, to demobilize the opposition and the fury of women and others who could be one to stand up and fight for this. They've done great damage, and there is no good reason to believe they would do differently if you rely on them and rely on the elections for them. But on another level, it's just too late. The Supreme Court has not ruled yet. This is not yet law. We have to fight to stop it now, not wait till it's become law, give up without a fight and rely on these elections. And if we had the kind of struggle and resistance that we were talking about, the kind that cleaved open all of society and created that kind of legitimacy crisis for the rulers, we actually could back them up. And if we don't succeed, you're going to be in a much stronger place. If they do overturn Roe v. Wade, if you built that powerful resistance, this networks of fury and opposition and refusal to let this go down, you're going to be in a stronger position to fight to win that right back, to fight to go forward in many different ways, to fight to help women and others who need abortions to get them. In the meantime, you're going to be in a much stronger position. And if you lay down now and rely on the elections and lose this right without fighting like everything you have, throwing everything you have into it, it'll be the opposite. These fascists will be on a tear. They will be unleashed. They will have the initiative. And the people are going to be in less of a fighting mood, more demoralized, more broken, more accommodating to atrocity, which has been far too much the dynamic. This is a fight that needs to be waged now.
Sunsara, I want to come back to some of the ideological questions you spoke about earlier. We'll get to the question of the me versus working in the interests of all of humanity and fighting for the interests of humanity. One form this comes up in, and it came up in something that you were involved in, is I don't want to listen to a white woman tell me about my struggle, because this predominantly, or most disproportionately is going to affect Black and brown women. And stay in your lane. This isn't your struggle, or this isn't the struggle of women. This is, if you use the word women, it excludes trans people. So therefore, we just have to talk about people, when the entire movement in opposition to abortion rights was part of a whole patriarchal fascist program of the subordination of women in many different aspects of life, with abortion being the cutting edge and the battering ram of all of that. I want to play an excerpt from an answer to a question that was presented to Bob Avakian in 2017 when he gave a speech that titled, the short title was "The Trump-Pence Regime Must Go." And in this question, he was asked about this student movement. And within this, he spoke about the question that had come up even then in 2017 of identity politics. So let's listen to this, because it has its tremendous relevance to some of what the young people and everybody's running into. Like I said, you ran into it.
Let's talk about something else that's been holding people back, and that's identity politics. The idea that if you're not part of a certain identity group, it's not your place to stand up against injustices that are directed against that group. Look, our first and most fundamental identity is as part of humanity. That's our first and most fundamental identity. And look, it's one thing to say that people who directly experience oppression have a lot to say about that and should be listened to. That's very true and very important. Let me make an analogy I've made before. If you're in the medical profession and people come to you and you don't even listen to them describe the symptoms or talk about how it's affecting them and what it means for them, you are not going to be a good medical professional. But if you listen to them and then say, well, I wish you luck, I hope you're able to do something about it. It's not my place to have anything to say about it. You're also a terrible medical professional, okay? And the analogy I'm making is, if you don't listen to and seek to learn from people who are directly experiencing something, including a terrible oppression, then you're not going to do good things. If you are arrogant and don't think you have anything to learn about that, or you think you can just tell everybody what to do without really trying to learn, then you're going to do bad things. But it's also very bad if you have the attitude that, well, that's happening to somebody else, I don't like it, I wish them well, but it's not my place to do anything about it. You are also doing very bad things. You're a human being. These are other human beings that are being, subjected to this. If you feel that it's an outrage, you should act. You should do everything you can. You should do everything you can to join with other people to fight against this and with the aim of putting a stop to it. This is, and let's be honest. Let's say you're not part of the identity group. Well, how easy is it for you? How perfect is it for you to have somebody tell you that's not your place to be involved? Oh, well, I'm so glad. I thought I might have to actually sacrifice something. I'm so glad that you're telling me that I don't have to do anything about this, except, listen to you tell me how terrible it is. No. We all should have an attitude that anything that's done that's an injustice has to be fought against. And we should all have an attitude of learning from each other and seeking the truth about things. And yes, there is a history in this country. I mean, it's just woven through the entire fabric of this country. Of people in the dominant group, in the oppressor group, even well-intentioned ones being condescending to people of the dominated and oppressed group and thinking that they have nothing to learn from them, or that that the people in that group couldn't possibly have any important ideas of their own and so on. This is a real problem, okay? And we should get rid of that. But at the same time, the most fundamental thing is, what is the actual truth of things? What does the evidence actually show? And what should we, as people who care about, what kind of world we live in, and who want a world where people are not unnecessarily suffering and subjected to totally unjustified oppression, what is our responsibility in that context?
Well, Andy, that is such a moving and really still very timely excerpt from BA. It speaks exactly to what so many young people are coming, and other people too, right now. I'm glad that you included that. I think it's important that we are fighting to stop the Supreme Court from doing an atrocity to women, carrying out an atrocity to women. And we need to wage this fight, but there's also a different culture that we need to be forging in the midst of this, going up against all that narrowness, that small-mindedness, the stay in your lane, think about self. I want to show sort of a beginning shoot, a beginning glimmer of some of what needs to be going on a much bigger scale, where these youth who've been part of the walkouts in New York did start going to broader parts of society and challenging others to join in this past weekend. And we need a lot more of this kind of thing. People getting out of their lane and going everywhere and drawing others into this fight. This is them at the steps of the Met Museum in New York.
We're walking out this Thursday to shut the city down. You're gonna cry. Every city, every town. Every city, every town. Shut the city down. Shut the city down. Every city, every town. Every city, every town. Shut the city down. Shut the city down. Shut the country down. Shut the country down. Post Roe. Hell no. Post Roe. Hell no. Post Roe. Hell no. Post Roe. Hell no. My body. My choice. My body. My choice.
Sunsara, that was great. On your radio show in WPFW in Washington, you had a couple of youth on your radio show. And one thing really struck me, is how the real heart is drummed out of young people in this society in terms of by all this identity politics and look out for yourself. We talked before, parents tell you, yes, you're right about this, but you really have to look out for yourself. Why do you have to be the one doing this? You do your schoolwork, do well here. Maybe you can do some good for people, but really stay in your lane. And they get told the same thing from activists. They get involved in something like Rise Up for Abortion Rights for the first time, and they run into people in other social movements who say, that's not going to work. The Supreme Court, that's a lock-in on that. You should be you shouldn't be doing this anyway. You should be, this is for black women, or this is for trans people, or this is for that. This is, why are you doing this? And all this stuff of look out for number one, or look out for this group or that group. And if you're not part of that group, you can't speak. Bob Avakian just talked to some of that. But I was very struck by what a 14-year-old said when you posed the question to her of, well, in New York, at least initially, there'll be abortion rights. So why are you out there on this? And let's just listen to her answer.
It's not about me, is it? I wouldn't plan on getting pregnant or needing an abortion, but that's not the point. The point isn't whether we have them in our state or where we live. It's the point that every woman or person with a uterus has a right to one. No matter what, it's not about me. It's the same reason that men would be protesting for this, because even if it doesn't specifically affect you, it will affect other people. And if you have basic human empathy and you care about other people, then you should care about this, because it's going to affect countless women and countless people with uteruses, and it's going to make so many people's lives so much worse that, it can't hurt to try and help, to try and do whatever we can, because I know that, I'm from Kentucky. If my friend were to ever get pregnant, I wouldn't want them to have to carry a pregnancy if they didn't want to. I hate the idea that that people don't think that it's right to be fighting for rights that don't directly affect you. I'd go to a BLM protest. I'm not black, but I'd go to one because I care, because I care about other people's rights, because I care that we're all equal and we should all have the same fundamental rights no matter where we live. And my question for the people that don't think we should be protesting because it doesn't directly affect us is, why don't you care?
I think a lot of older folks ought to take a listen to what that young 14-year-old said. But you also had on one of the youth organizers who's all of 15 years old, and she quite sharply and eloquently said why she's fighting for this.
A lot of the adults, in my life even, and I have very supportive adults around me, but there's a lot of thought about why me, or why your child, why do you have to skip your math test today? And like, I'm like, okay, but like, I'm going to these protests. I'm fighting for my future rights and the rights of the next generation, right? Like, if not me, who? And if not now, when? That's another chant that we do. That's like just a core value of mine. Like, if I want something to happen, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it with everything that I have. As a movement and as like a predominantly like women's movement, although it absolutely is an issue for trans men and non-binary people. But the anger that we possess that is just not, it's not accepted in other areas of society. Like, we are making a space for that. And that is so powerful. And people don't acknowledge that kind of power. And so we have to acknowledge it in ourselves. And like, our anger is what's going to keep this going, is what's going to stop Roe from being overturned, hopefully. And, you know, we just need more of it. We need more love, like within our communities, within our movement. But anger is really what's going to drive this home, you know, because that's the reason why people are out in the streets, to like show the Supreme Court that we are angry and we can, like, we are going to fight this, you know?
So I think that was a righteous stand from a youth organizer for Rise Up for Abortion Rights. So what is next for the movement to stop the Supreme Court from going ahead with stripping away the right to abortion for women?
So we're really calling on everybody. Look, Rise Up for Abortion Rights and others have been in the streets. We put this question before society in a certain level. It's very important. And thousands of people have been involved in this movement, raising the demand to stop the Supreme Court from overturning Roe v. Wade. Now we need to bring everybody together. Everybody watching this, everybody who was in the streets today for the day of action that Rise Up for Abortion Rights did, everybody who we reached in the streets today, and everybody else we can reach between now and Sunday. We need to get everybody who cares about women and girls' future and justice overall to tune in. We're doing a national organizing summit this Sunday. Online, you can log in anywhere around the country, but you need to clear your time and log in, because we need to come together. We're going to hear from leaders of Rise Up for Abortion Rights who have been leading this and assessing where we're at and forging and planning next steps so that we can together in this summit and then in the meetings and discussions and the actions that flow out of it that need to go on across this country, really paint this country green, really turn society upside down, really call forth the fury at the future that is being threatened and the joy and the beauty of standing up, and really take this throughout society and fight to win. This is going to be a all hands on deck. Everybody come together. We're going to plot out next steps, and we're going to take this to a higher level, standing on what we've done and really fighting to win. So this Sunday, everybody should tune in. Everybody should be part of it. Spread the word. Get everybody you know to tune in. That's how we're going forward together.
All right, thanks, Sunsara. This conference is very important. This movement has to be built as broadly as possible, as determined, as sustained, struggled, so that we actually build the kind of movement of hundreds of thousands and millions of people who are determined, as you said, with the Mario Savio quote, to bring this country to a halt, to defend the right of women to abortion. And this is part of a larger question. If we build this movement in the way it needs to be built, and if people come into it, it's going to pose bigger questions for people about why are things the way they are? Why have they taken this move right now that comes up all the time? Why is there continued police shootings of black and brown people? Why is there this war in Ukraine with the threat of nuclear war? Why is the environment being destroyed? And as they ask these questions, this is part of forging a people, what we call a revolutionary people. And this is absolutely decisive if there's going to be the prospect of a radically different world through an actual revolution, which is what our show is about and for. This is the key task that's gone into in the work, something terrible or something truly emancipating, why this that goes into why this is a rare time when revolution becomes possible. So there's a tremendous import to building this movement as broadly with its tremendous diversity, including diversity of political opinions. So to the RevComs, we need to throw all the way into this movement and to build it as broad as it should be while bringing in our full perspective of what is the problem and what is the solution. And a way I want to tie this particular segment together, where we spent the bulk of our show on this, is with a new article that appears on revcom.us, where Bob Avakian speaks to this kind of woke identity politics and focus on me and my interests and instead of on all of humanity, and ties it together with experience he had as he was becoming a revolutionary and working with the Black Panther Party. And this article is titled, Working with Black Panthers, Working for Revolution, Not Woke Identity Bullshit. So with that, Sunsara, we'll see you soon.
All right, it's been great being here, and I let's watch this piece from BA.
Working with Black Panthers, Working for Revolution, Not Woke Identity Bullshit, by Bob Avakian.
I'm going to bring you on now a member of the Peace and Freedom Party who has worked diligently on behalf of Brother Huey. I give you Bob Avakian.
During the years when I worked closely with the Black Panther Party and its leadership, in its revolutionary days in the 1960s, when there were discussions and at times disagreements, they did not say to me, "Who are you, as a white man, to talk about the liberation of Black people and revolution? Who are you to disagree with us about this?"
Teach them the need to support the Black liberation movement led by the Black Panther Party as a strong, fearless voice against American imperialism, and to link up with all the people in Vietnam, in China, in Angola, in Latin America, and everywhere else who are standing shoulder to shoulder to drive this vicious beast out of the way and out of the pages of history.
No, things were never based on identity, but on what was true and not true. That's what we were all trying to figure out. This was the case when I first encountered Huey Newton at an African American cultural program in Oakland. He approached me and said, "Who are you? Socrates?" And this led to a back and forth about revolution. Was it needed? And could this revolution actually be made? The same was true of later discussions I had with Huey, Bobby Seale, Eldridge Cleaver, and other leaders of the Black Panther Party. Always the basis and standard was what was true and not true, never what identity someone was. What we were grappling with was how to radically change the world in an emancipating way, not how to carve out a niche for ourselves, or how to tear down some other people and climb over them to get a better position for ourselves in this terrible world as it is, under the domination of this system of capitalism, imperialism. This is what everyone who cares about the oppressed of the earth and the future of humanity should be grappling with, on the basis of principle and integrity, not the hucksterism and hustling of those seeking to turn identity into capital.
Wednesday, May 25th, 2022 was the second anniversary of the brutal murder of George Floyd, a black man in Minneapolis, Minnesota, by the white cop Derek Chauvin, and the massive, beautiful uprising of millions of people demanding justice and change. Last year, on the first anniversary, the RNL Show produced a deep segment on the profound and beautiful uprising in response to his murder. It is rich in lessons that are as relevant today, if not more so, than a year ago. And we're going to show that segment again, anchored by my co-host Sunsara Taylor, in a moment. But first, 2 points. Here we are, 2 years out from George Floyd's murder, and the wanton police murder and repression directed against black people and other people of color continues unabated. Indeed, the figures for such murders in 2021 was even higher than in 2020 or the several years before that. Talk of reform has been replaced by tough-on-crime code words for the stepped-up repression, often by black mayors like Eric Adams, the Black Giuliani, in New York City. Second, all too many people are saying in response to these counterattacks that protest doesn't work. It is not worth their effort and risk of taking to the streets. Often this emanates from the NGO woke world, who in reality are oppression entrepreneurs who seek funds for petty reform projects and who have no heart for the momentous struggle to end all oppression. This line is complete bullshit. It has nothing to do with the struggle against the oppression of black, brown, women, differently gendered people, or anyone fighting against what this system does to the people and to the environment. It is poison to anyone who really has a heart to fight for the emancipation of all humanity.
It has been 1 year since police murdered George Floyd. A year that has witnessed what we called at the time a beautiful rising. And it was. Nearly every voice in society has given their take on this. Joe Biden paid lip service to the victims of police murder while appealing once again to Republicans for unity and, quote, healing the soul of America. Corporations tweeted stuff. Meanwhile, artists and thinkers are agonizing over the continued carnage by police of black people and other people of color and the ongoing and relentless white supremacy that assaults black people, immigrants, and others in every realm of their lives. Journalists and critics are pointing to the limitations of reforms without knowing exactly where to go or how to get there. People who took part in this beautiful rising are asking, where did the movement go? And don't know how to go forward to stand up for the very principles for which they braved tear gas and clubs and worse. And those at the very bottom of society, those who bear the brunt of police murder and terror the most, are experiencing and constantly telling us revcoms over and over again, they are hunting us. They are hunting our children. What are we supposed to do? Big questions are posed. But the real lessons of this beautiful rising sparked by the murder of George Floyd are being hidden, distorted, and lied about. The people need to understand what they accomplished. No, murder by police has not ended, and this is a painful reality that we all need to confront. But this doesn't mean these protests didn't do any good. And it doesn't mean it's time to get more practical and settle for working for some petty reforms. And it certainly doesn't mean that nothing can be done to end all this. No, the real lesson to draw from the murder of George Floyd and from the more than 400 years since the first Africans were dragged to these shores in slave chains is captured powerfully by Bob Avakian in his speech, Why We Need an Actual Revolution and How We Can Really Make Revolution.
White supremacy and capitalism. They have been completely interwoven and tightly stitched together through the whole development of this country down to today. To attempt to really put an end to white supremacy while maintaining the system of capitalism would tear the entire fabric of the country apart. White supremacy and capitalism. It is not possible to overcome and finally abolish the one without overthrowing and finally abolishing the other.
Abolishing this system means revolution, the overthrow of this system. And what these protests and this beautiful rising revealed was precisely the potential for this revolution. This is spoken to in a declaration, a call to get organized now for a real revolution that was recently issued by the Revcoms. After speaking about the potential revealed in the outpourings around the climate crisis, the outpourings of fury of women against their abuse and degradation, this declaration and call says the following about this rising. Last summer, when millions of us, of all races and genders, rose up all over this country in righteous rebellion in response to the vicious murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor by police, this powerfully demonstrated the potential for revolution. We were supported and joined by millions more and countries all around the world. And at the height of this, the whole country, the whole world was compelled to recognize and talk about the long and continuing chain of these racist murders and big questions about the whole history and nature of this country. Yes, this powerful rising was, in the short run, misled into dead ends by people working for meaningless, petty reforms and seeking funds for themselves and positions within the structures of this system. But that does not change the fact that what was demonstrated was the possibility and potential for something much greater and far better, an actual revolution. It's important to look at how this is so and how much it matters, and how all this didn't just spring forth like magic, but was brought forward through a process of struggle that needs to be built on and continued to take it forward. It mattered that the masses of people in Minneapolis broke with protest as usual and lit up the sky that first night in defiance, shocking those in power and sending a message to the people that we are not taking this, and through this igniting a simmering rage all across this country. It mattered that as these protests spread, they reached into the heartland of America, including rural and southern towns that have been hotbeds of the KKK, so-called Trump country. This showed how when the people stand up with right on their side, this can shake even the strongholds of reaction, giving strength to those who had been intimidated into silence and even breaking loose some who had been locked into oblivious ignorance. It mattered that the Rev-Coms were out in the midst of all of this, joining in the uprising and also struggling over the way forward, sounding the alarm on the fascism of the Trump-Pence regime, pointing to the need and the potential for an actual revolution, and bringing forward the leadership we have for this revolution in Bob Avakian, and more.
When that pig put his knee on George Floyd's neck, that concentrated 400 years of a system that has had its boot on the necks of black people. But you all standing up here brought something else into the picture. The possibility that that boot could be lifted. And this is important.
This movement has already put Trump in a fucking bunker. Let's drive him out the White House. And from there, go on to make revolution and get to a society where black people, brown people, people all over the world, people of different sexual orientations can actually live a life worthy of human beings.
There is a leader, I'm telling you, sisters and brothers, you have not heard about him because they don't want you to know about him. But he came out of the 60s. He gave his heart to the people. He never gave up on revolution, and he went to work developing a strategy so we can bring this system down. He wrote a constitution for a new socialist republic in North America with a new economy, new culture, new laws, new education. This is Bob Avakian, and you need to find out about him if you want this to end. How do we get out of this mess? How do we get out of this mess? Revolution, nothing less! Revolution, nothing less!
It mattered that as the rulers and other reactionaries pit black and brown people against each other, and some places leading to ugly violence among the people, that the Rev-Com stepped into this and led in forging unity, including a march of hundreds here in Los Angeles for black and brown unity.
It could have been anybody else taken from their land, used for the foundation of this country, but it was black people that were taken.
People from Central America, people from Mexico, that come to this country to try to bring a better life to their family. And they're told that black people are lazy. They're told that black people are criminals. And if you're black, you're told that those people that are coming from across the border are taking your jobs. And that serves their fucking system to keep us in the situation that we're in instead of coming together and recognizing who our true enemy is. Not the people across the street from us, not the people that look like me and you, but the system.
It's about uniting black and brown from the hood, from the neighborhood, Crips, Bloods, essays.
All of us united, fighting against the power, you know?
And that immigrants locked in this country's torturous detention centers went on hunger strike to show their solidarity with the struggle for black lives.
We are speaking from the Mesa Verde detention facility in Bakersfield, California. We are speaking out against the disregard of human lives. We are speaking out against the racist, criminal, and justice system.
We want the police to stop murdering Black people. They were taught crimes of the people.
It mattered that statues paying tribute to slavery came down. And as each fell, it was like a scab being peeled off an oozing infection, with more and more people seeing just how deep the white supremacy goes, to the core and foundation and ongoing functioning of this country. It mattered that people lost their fear.
Fine, come out, shoot me. I'm fucking white. I've never had to worry about that in my life. Black people have been afraid for so long.
That when the police, the National Guard came at them with rubber bullets and tear gas and more, that the people came back stronger, with such courage and defiance that they drove that bloated bag of fascist feces, Donald Trump, to borrow a phrase from Bob Avakian, into a goddamn bunker.
Guess who's hiding in the basement? It's that coward, the bunker boy.
And it mattered that when Donald Trump called out the U.S. military to stage a fascist photo op, that the people came back once again with such defiance that they drove a wedge between Mark Milley, the top military commander in the country, and Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief, propelling Milley to apologize before the eyes of the world.
I should not have been there.
In part, this revealed the fear of Milley and others that their military could lose legitimacy in the eyes of the people, including among huge numbers of the Black and brown members who make up its ranks. Reports have been coming out that many Black National Guardsmen were ashamed to tell their families that they were part of patrolling these protests. All this has potentially profound implications for the future revolutionary situation we are fighting to bring into being. It mattered that as the fascist forces began to regain their footing and started attacking and threatening, ramming their cars into protests, even outright gunning down protesters in the streets of Kenosha, Wisconsin, that 21 brave heroes who should never be forgotten did lay down their lives, setting a powerful moral example and demonstrating vividly the kind of unity and sacrifice that will be necessary to withstand this system's repression as we go forward to put an end to this system itself that spawned all of this nightmare. And it mattered that this beautiful rising inspired people all over the world to stand up as well. In Britain, Brazil, Iran, Syria, France, India, Senegal, Mexico, Japan, and everywhere in between. Even the strength of the recent resistance among Palestinians against the genocidal assault by Israel cannot be separated from the inspiration of this beautiful rising and its impact on the world. All this gives just a taste of how much it will inspire people all over the world as we make advances for an actual revolution in this country and finally win a revolution in this most monstrous imperialist beast that has ever existed. No, this didn't sustain at the same high level, and people don't know without good leadership where it needs to go now. But the point is, all these people are still out there, and we do have the leadership we need to go further than a beautiful rising to a beautiful world. That leadership is Bob Avakian, someone who's developed the scientific approach, the strategy to make revolution, the vision of a new society, and who is actively leading us in navigating to get there now. And it is this potential for revolution that Bob Avakian recognized in this beautiful rising, and he spoke to it right in the height of it on June 1st of last year, in a statement that ended like this.
We do not need to live in this world where so much of humanity suffers so unnecessarily under this system of capitalism imperialism that cannot exist without exploiting and degrading people, suffocating their humanity, and killing them without mercy. We can do much better. Don't listen to talk about how it can never happen. Look around you. What seemed impossible yesterday is happening right now. Revolution. Why should we settle for anything less?
Yes, the fascists lashed out with fury against this challenge to white supremacy and unleashed threats and violence against the people, and all this culminated in a violent fascist coup attempt in the Capitol on January 6th. But even this very negative development holds a potential positive within it. It has revealed and brought to the fore the irreconcilable differences that are tearing society apart, contributing to the very rare time and circumstance that we find ourselves in when the possibility for a real revolution could be ripened. So on this anniversary of the brutal police murder of George Floyd and the beautiful rising this sparked, we need to recognize and stand on all the strengths of the people and all the potential that was revealed in this for an actual revolution. And we need to go to work with the leadership we have in Bob Avakian and the strategy and direction that is laid out in this declaration to transform this potential into a force that is hastening and preparing to bring this system down.
3 weeks ago, we produced our 100th episode. It's an incredible show that really concentrates what we do on the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. It's a must-see. And this show began a campaign to grow the audience of our show, to financially support the show, and for people to work with us on the many aspects of producing the show and popularizing it. So to close today's program, we're going to play an excerpt of some remarks by Atlas, who's a member of our team, on why you should support the RNL show. And his remarks were part of a fundraising webinar that we hosted on April 24th. And then this is going to be followed by a short video, we showed it last week, produced by pros from the RNL team. And then with that, we're going to close this, the 103rd episode of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. I'm Andy Zee, saying good night to you from Los Angeles, California. Looking forward to seeing you next Thursday night at 5 p.m. Pacific Time and 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time.
Part of what the RNL show is about is trying to help people make sense of everything that's going on in the world. You know, you go on Twitter, you go on the news, you see, oh gosh, there's a world, maybe World War III, Ukraine, all of this. You see immigrants, millions of immigrants and what they're going through. You see typhoons and you see tornadoes and you see your Twitter feed is full of all kinds of BS and you're just trying to make sense of all of this. What is going on? And the RNL show brings that to people. It brings people what is actually happening, what is actually going on. What are the facts? What is the cold, hard truth about what's going on? And we don't give it to you in any kind of varnished, diluted way. We give it to you straight up. What is going on? We need a lot of people contributing their creativity, watching the show, watching the RNL show. We need to reach people. We need to get out to many millions of people, and we can. But in order to do that, we're going to need billboards. We're going to need stickers. We want to get stickers in your hands. We want to get posters up everywhere. And if you want to help design these posters and stuff like that, hit us up. It's time. This is the time to get out there and get millions of people watching this show. So we need right now thousands of dollars in order to get out on the craziest advertising campaign you can imagine. We need your creativity to come up with some wild ideas, some out of the box ideas for how we're going to make everybody from South Central to Chicago to New York and even people all over the world think, what the heck is that show about? I need to see that. Millions of people. That's going to take your funds on a lot of funds. We need a lot of funds. So come into this, donate right now, and contribute so that we can get this show for this 100th episode to thousands of people who are new and going forward to millions of people so we can make this revolution, so we can change the way that people are thinking about reality. And we can bring many, many thousands into this revolution right now.
Hey, so I was watching the RNL show last night.
Oh yeah? Yeah, I did too. It was so good.
Yeah. So what are you doing to share it with people?
What do you mean share it with people? I just watched the show.
What do you mean you just watched it?
What do you mean, what do I mean? I just asked you. What do you mean?
Okay, well, what are you getting out of this?
There's like cutting edge exposure of the system and its crimes, why they're actually happening, how we could stop them. Is this revolutionary analysis and leadership every single week.
Okay, well, then don't you think other people should have this too?
Okay, I see what you're getting at. Yeah. All right, so how do you spread the word?
Well, for starters, I don't watch it by myself. I watch it with my friends, and we talk about it.
Well, how else do you do it?
Why don't I just show you? You can print flyers for the show by clicking the link in the description of this video. Pass them out at school, work, parties, wherever you frequent. There's a QR code that takes people directly to the show, and inside, there's a template for people to cut out their own stencils. I'm using chalk spray to tag the skate park. You can make a banner with the show's name and handle and hang it over the freeway overpass. Or host your own watch parties. These are only a few examples of what people can do to grow the audience of this show and build the revolution that humanity needs. We want to hear from you. How have you been spreading the show? What ideas do you have? Drop them in the comments section below this video. Wow, that was so much fun, right?
That was so sick, man.
We should do this every Friday.
We should do this every day.